Hi, my name's Joe Harris. I'd like to talk to you about an easy way to set up your guitar, acoustic guitar, just using a quarter and common things you have around the house. My belief is that setups, a basic setup, should be done by the player for a few reasons. One is it doesn't cost you anything. Primarily, you know how you play and you know how you like the action. So if you went to a Luther and had it set up, then you might go back and say, well, it's not low enough. And then he goes lower and maybe he needs to replace the bridge because it went too low and now it buzzes for your style of playing. But if you do your own setup, I think you can maximize your playability, match it to your style. I've just got a few terms to start with. One is relief, and relief is the string height at your 7th fret when the 1st fret and the 12th fret are depressed. Be at the 7th fret. The way I like mine, you may be able to just barely hear that little bit of click. The neck on that is pretty straight. And I'll see if I can show that to you. And I like, on my setups, I like to get my neck as straight as I can get it and put in very little relief. But you can see that's a pretty straight neck on that one. And then the action is another term. And that's how high your strings are off the fret, measured at the 12th fret. And then the saddle is this piece of bone or plastic or whatever they use right up here that the strings bend over and then they go into the guitar and they're secured in there. And then there's a nut at this end. I've never had a problem with the nut being too high. And I'm not going to cover that in this, but if the nut's too high, and it's unplayable, you can get a new nut and sand it down to your liking to get it the height you like without buzzing. And your truss rod, you'll have to adjust your truss rod most likely in a setup. The truss rod runs down through the neck, and on this one it's accessible through the sound hole. And usually with guitars with a truss rod in the sound hole, you usually get a wrench like this, and you simply, I can't see it, but you stick it in there. I could see it if I was looking from the other end, and you adjust it one way or another. And there's two kinds of truss rods, basically, a single action truss rod and a dual action truss rod. And I know that this GS Mini Taylor has a single action truss rod, which means it will act to bow the neck back. And it relies on the string tension, which could be anywhere from 150 to 200 pounds, depending on the scale length and the strings that you use. So the strings put pressure on it to pull it this way, and the truss rod will bend it back that way. On this one, I don't know. I couldn't find out whether it has a dual acting truss rod or not, but some of them are, and it's kind of handy to have one that way. On this Taylor GS Mini, you access the truss rod here. There's 3 screws you take out, and it takes a nut driver, and you can adjust the truss rod in there. tools you're going to need is a truss rod wrench, which I showed you there, or in this case you'd need a socket. Usually a socket screwdriver is what they use. And I just used a quarter to set them up. I've also got a dime, a penny, and a nickel. And some pliers are handy. When you go to do a setup, you want to loosen your strings nice and loose and pull this truss, or pull this saddle out from the high side. One side's low and one side's high. The high E is on the high side, and the high E is on the low side, and the low E is on the high side. I got that backwards. But it comes out better if you pull it out on the low E side, because it's angled in like that, and it goes back in easier too. But basically what you do, you need some sandpaper. I use 80 grit or finer. And you just take these saddles out and lay your sandpaper out flat on it, a board or a table or anything, and you work that back and forth across that sandpaper, and you shorten the height of that saddle till you get the strings down where they're playable, where you like them. Now, if you go too far, you're going to get buzzing. And that's where it's nice to come in with some figures to where you'll be safe, probably, from buzzing, and that would be on the high E string. The first string is typically 4/64 to 5/64, and if you stay between there, it's probably not going to buzz. I like mine lower, and mine are set up lower. But that's kind of up to you. On the measurements on a quarter, and I've got to read this because I don't remember the exact amount. 4/64 is 0.0625 inches, and a quarter is 0.069 inches thick. So I got this one set up a little lower, and that's 4/64 on the high E string at the 12th fret. It actually pushes that string up just a little bit, so mine is small, is less than that. And I think I came out with put a penny under there, and a penny measured just about right, which was 0.0598 inches, which is less than 4/64. And this one here was set up by Taylor, and it's pretty close to 4/64. See if I can get this where you can see it. 12th fret. It's actually not moving the string up hardly at all, just barely. So it's probably sitting right at, it's a little bit higher than the one I set up there, but it's right at 4/64. And on the other side, it's going to be just slightly more. It'll maybe a 64th or 2/64 higher. And that's determined by your saddle. I don't know if you can see that, but the saddle's higher on one end than it is on the other. It matches the curvature of your fretboard, but your bass strings you want a little bit higher because they travel further when you pluck them. The small ones can be lower because they don't travel as far. But that's pretty much it. It's a short video. I know it's my first video. I'm going to be coming out with some more short videos. If you found anything in this interesting, please like and subscribe. Now this Taylor, I was surprised when it came in. It was set up really nice, and like I said, I'll probably lower it, but it's set up pretty good. And this Orangewood Oliver Jr. is inexpensive guitar, and they say at the Orangewood site that they ship these in from their manufacturer in China to Los Angeles, and they have technicians that set them up there. And I'm not going to bash on Orangewood, because for the price, this is $236 with a pickup, and the setup was just lousy. It was almost unplayable. It was 3 to 4 times as high as it should have been, but it's very playable now, and it's a simple process, and it's kind of fun to do your own. If you try to get it to the maximum low without the buzzing, you could run into a situation where you just start buzzing. In that case, if you want to get it as low as possible, I'd order another nut. And there's several places, not nut, but saddle. There's several places you can order saddles on the web, and just do a search on it. So you have another saddle. So if you go too low, you can get another saddle and mark it where you went with your old one, and then just sand it just a little bit taller so it doesn't buzz anymore. On the relief, like I was saying earlier, I don't know if that's in the camera or not very good, but you hold down on the 1st fret and the 12th fret, use a capo, and then you go to the 7th fret and just tap down with your hand. There's a measurement for that, but mine are so low, that relief is so low. In other words, the bow, the relief, the bow in my necks on my guitars is so subtle that all I want to hear is just a tiny click when I push down on that 7th fret. And that's the most playable situation for me, especially when you're playing up here on the higher end of it. If you stay up here in the 1st position, it's not quite as important, your setup isn't, but if you get down here in the middle, it really makes a difference in the playability. And I don't like a lot of relief, because if you put, and there's figures for how much relief you should have, and it's more than I want. I want mine straight as possible. If you back bow this a little bit like that, then you're going to have spot in here where it's high. It's not going to be uniform all the way down. Now it's going to be a little closer at your nut, because at your nut, the height is not quite as much from the top of the fret to the bottom of the string, but it's going to be more uniform all the way down if you can get that straight. Now, I have run into some problems with setups on a few occasions, and that was with the B string. And you know, all the guitars I've owned, or this is the most expensive one, are not expensive guitars. This one was $500, this Taylor, and then I put a pickup in it and I made it $600. And it has a removable neck, so you could just replace the neck. But if it doesn't set up, if your neck is twisted, or if you've got a high spot, the fret's not all the way down, you know, you'd have to think long and hard, I guess, whether you want to take a $200 or $300 guitar to a luthier and have them correct it. If you've got the tools, the luthier tools, and you got one fret that's kind of high, you can sand that fret down, and you could take a crowning tool and recrown that fret at a lower height and get rid of that one if you just got one or two frets that are buzzing, and all the rest is okay. But you know, I would say you probably need to get into a guitar that's over $500 before you'd want to do that. I would just buy a new guitar and try it. Now, one thing that I have done is I've bought most of my guitars online, and that's a problem because it's hard to check some of that stuff. It's hard to check the setup. You just got to take their word for it that it's going to be okay, that there's not going to be any problems with a twisted neck or that. And I bought this Taylor after playing it in the store, and it sounded real good, and it played easy, and it had a good setup on it. And also on your truss rods, if your guitar sits for a while, or it's a weather change or a big temperature change, humidity change, your setup's going to change. So it's something you really need to know, and don't be afraid to adjust that truss rod. They're there for that purpose, and they're accessible for that purpose. Very accessible. So you're going to end up, if you're going to maintain a guitar that has a good setup and it's very playable, adjusting your truss rod at some point. And that's all I have for now, and I'll be making some more videos as time goes on. Please like and subscribe if there was anything in this that you found interesting. Thanks so much.